Hello, welcome to Happiness in Your Life. And today we have a wonderful guest. He is an amazing man as well as an amazing friend, Stephen Washington. He is a former Broadway dancer. He's been in The Lion King. He is a Pilates master and instructor and a Qigong master instructor. And there's a little more about him that you would probably never guess. Stephen, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Doe. So good to be with you. We made it. Here we are.
Yeah, well, nobody would know, but we tried to have this interview a couple months ago, and between hurricanes, plural, and other things coming up, it's finally happening. So I'm super happy to have you.
Me too.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about you first. You danced on Broadway.
I did. I
How did
did.
how does that even happen? You were a professional dancer. You started dancing when you were young.
It happened very slowly, so one must be patient. So, yeah, I started dancing when I was in high school. And when you're a boy, usually when you start dancing, there aren't many other boys in the room with you. So I started then. I had a lovely teacher, Felicity Foote. She gave me a scholarship at her school in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I learned classical jazz and ballet. And that just gave me a hunger to learn more about dance. And eventually, I went to NYU and studied dance there. I started working in small dance companies around New York City, traveled the world dancing with these companies. Eventually, I started dancing for the Metropolitan Opera and New York City Opera. And that was really an amazing thing. When I was a kid, I would go to the opera and we would go backstage and get a tour. And I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined when I was just a little boy that I'd someday be dancing on those stages. And then during that time, I started to venture out and start auditioning for musicals. And the one musical that I saw where I got this visceral feeling within me of excitement and also identification was The Lion King. When I saw that show, I could see myself dancing on the stage, and that doesn't happen. I've seen a lot of dance in theater, and I didn't always get that same feeling. And so I auditioned for that show on a whim one day, and I wasn't even fully prepared for it because it was really on a whim. I was going to audition for a cruise ship or The Lion King. And the cruise ship, I got the days mixed up, so I was the wrong day for that, and all that was left was The Lion King. And so I went. I sang "Happy Birthday," which is not a song that you would normally sing at a audition for a Broadway show. That's how unprepared I was. But I showed up there and I danced my heart out, and I made it down to the five last five guys out of 150, perhaps. And I didn't get the job.
Mm.
I went about my life for another year, and then suddenly I got a phone call asking me to come in to audition again for The Lion King, and I thought I was going into a similar situation like that, and it was a private audition. It was just me, myself, the casting director, the dance supervisor for the show, and his assistant. A-
Wow.
And by the end of that audition, I knew that I'd gotten the job. And but I didn't get the official call until later that night, and I was jumping up and down for joy.
I'll
Wi
bet.
Within a few weeks, I was on a plane to Toronto because they were hiring for the Toronto cast of The Lion King. So I started there, then I made my way back to Broadway, and then I went on the national tour as well for a few years. So I did Ni Lion King for about 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The show is 25 years old this year, this month actually. So if you haven't seen it, go out and see it. It's just such a magical theatrical experience. It'll just burst your heart open and inspire you, and connect you more to those around you and just really the planet.
That is amazing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg about you.
Mhm,
Which I'm like,
mhm.
we could talk about you for a week, I swear. But
Well,
and
yeah,
even just
thanks.
even that part is about the testament of just going for things. You weren't 100% prepared. You didn't think that you got it at all, and then a whole year later, the timing lined up right for you to
Yes.
have that enormous, wonderful experience. So that is amazing.
But here's the thing, I didn't get the job initially, but I walked away from that experience feeling so good about myself. because I
Really?
went in and I gave it my all, and I felt really good, and I was like, "I don't care if I didn't get it. I did it. I didn't think I was going to do it. I did it. I did well, and I proved something to myself." And that was the most important thing. So that lesson is a lesson that I still hold dearly, all these years later. Just that it's worth it to try something, even if it doesn't come out exactly the way that you hoped it would, doesn't mean that there isn't something really amazing that comes out of it.
So you win before the outcome. The outcome is just the
Mm,
cherry on top or the icing on the cake.
yeah.
That's great. So okay, now things take a turn, and I know this because I have a secret. I have Stephen's book, Recovering You,
Yeah.
which talks about, well, there's three different things basically going on. There's your story, which is beyond fascinating. That's just the very first part. There's also a guide for people who we'll talk about in just a brief moment here, for people who may be going through certain things, past, present, and future. And then there's also Qigong exercises at the end of every chapter. So this is three books in one. It's absolutely amazing.
Thank
And
you.
as just one of the things, as a memoir, it would be wonderful. As just a guidebook, it would be wonderful. And as a Qigong practice manual, it would be wonderful. But because it's all these three things, you really become immersed in your life, your experiences, but you bring it into the reader, my own, when I read it. For example, I'm gonna go, yeah, 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 because I'm so excited about the book. But okay, I'm gonna stop there and tell me then, you're at the top of the world, Broadway, Lion King. How does addiction fit into this?
Well, addiction had touched my life from a very young age. I was surrounded by it as I was growing up. It was alcoholism ran through my immediate family, and alcoholism and drug addiction ran through my extended family. And basically, everyone was doing the best that they could to live and survive and manage the trauma that they've had experienced in their lives. But I don't think people really knew that they were dealing with trauma. We didn't know trauma the way that we know it today, right? We talk about trauma a lot now. So there was a lot of trauma. And so I was exposed to all of that. I inherited a lot of that ancestral trauma. And then my own traumatic experiences growing up, especially being a sensitive kid. So I by the time I found my first drink, I had my first drink with that dance teacher I told you about that I traveled. I traveled to Europe with her one summer and my other fellow students, and we toured and we danced and we traveled around Germany and Switzerland. And the last night was a big celebration, and I had my first beer, and that feeling I'll never forget because it felt like I could finally breathe. I felt like before then, I felt like I was holding my breath as I was moving through my life because I was navigating all the chaos in my family. My parents had a very terrible marriage and it was very chaotic. I was navigating what it's like to be a young Black boy in America. I was navigating being part of the LGBT community. I knew very young that I was different. I didn't quite know exactly what it was, but I always felt like I was on the outside. And so having that drink and the drinks that followed that night, suddenly I felt like I was on the inside. Suddenly I felt like I could connect to people. Suddenly I felt like I was smart or I was funny. And just being in the world with people felt easier because I was always um I'm a pretty introverted person with extroverted tendencies. And suddenly I felt like I could be in the world. So I carried that and I chased that feeling I got that night for years, all the way through high school, through college, through my dance career. And alcohol and drugs were always my close companion. It helped me to be in the world. And I did that for many years without great consequence, although there were a few occasions when I remember I was drinking one New Year's Eve. I was drinking, I think I was smoking pot too, and I just had so much that I literally lost my ability to see. I'm sitting talking to my friend, and I suddenly everything goes black and I can't see them anymore. And that is a pretty scary thing. And you would imagine that from that experience, one would say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I'll never do that again. But that's what addiction does. Like the consequences of our actions become greater and greater, but we continue to do and engage in those behaviors despite those negative consequences. And so that's what happened for me, and that happened all through my career as a dancer. But I would just try to manage those things as much as I could because I couldn't imagine living life without it because it was my tool to help me be in the world. By the time I got into Lion King, it really reached a fevered pitch because there were just so many things happening in my life. I was having this great career high. I was also in a relationship that, as beautiful as he was, it wasn't where I needed to be. And I was afraid to walk away.
Mm.
So I just stayed silent and stayed within it. Um, and it was just this and the stress of the job because my job at the Lion King was very stressful. I was a swing. I was responsible for knowing 8 different parts. And at any given moment, I could go on stage and have to do one of those roles. And that was a very stressful thing for me. So I was managing all of that. And that's when I started to just come apart at the edges with my using, still trying to juggle it.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful for that time because if it hadn't come to that critical mass, I could have gone on indefinitely, abusing myself, mistreating my body, continuing to wake up in the morning and sometimes feel like, oh, damn, I'm still alive.
Wow.
Or looking in the mirror and thinking, who is this person I'm looking at? I don't even recognize you.
And so you would never, ever, ever in a million years guess that from just knowing you today. So that alone is proof that when you have the right tools to help with trauma, everything can change. And it doesn't matter. I mean, how old were you when you had your first drink to when you had your last drink?
I was what, 15? No, I was four, 14 or 15. Oh, maybe I was
Mhm.
15. I was 15 and I had my first drink and I had my last, what I hope will be my last drink, um, at the age of 31, I believe.
Wow. I mean, that's not just a couple years or,
Mm-mm.
experimenting and it went a little far. That was your life. You didn't have a 20s. You didn't know an adult life without those crutches or those, really bad tools to help you through them.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
here he is, and he made it through. And now you're how many years sober?
This last July was 20 years.
Do you
And
know
it
what you
really,
get
it
that
really, it really goes by in a blink.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I gotta say that because otherwise people can say, what is he, 32 now? You know, to
No,
make sure
I'm
people know
51.
this is not, this didn't just happen. This has become your second life, really, that you chose and you worked for and you achieved. And you're with your book, you're gonna help other people do the same, which is amazing. Now, the book, how did this come out?
Well, the funny thing about Recovering You is that it was originally an online course that
Mhm.
I created back in 2018. The course was called Release, Recover, and Renew. And I knew when I made that course that that was just the beginning of the work I was going to do around recovery and offering the tools that I've picked up over the years. Once we all entered into the pandemic, and all of our lives were greatly changed during that time while we were at home in isolation. I received a email from a woman named Georgia from New World Library. She'd seen my writings on my husband Lee Harris, his website, or I think maybe he had included one of my short stories in a newsletter, and so she reached out to me. She was curious about whether or not I wanted to write a book. And the subject matter that came to mind initially was creating a holistic guide for people who are dealing with addiction and helping them to live a more conscious, joyous life through movement and breath and self massage and community building and compassionate inquiry, all these different tools. So I started writing the book in October of 2020, and I turned in my manuscript a little less than a year later. And it was an incredible process. It was an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And I wasn't really even looking for that opportunity. I started writing back in 2016, and I thought maybe I would write a book someday, but I wasn't pursuing it. I just thought, just chop wood, carry water, do what you
Mhm.
love, which is to write, and put it out into the world. And that's enough. That's enough. And so this opportunity just literally took my breath away, and I'm just so grateful that I'm potentially able to share my story and these practices with more people. And this book is, yes, for people in addiction who are in addiction recovery, but it's also for people who might not be in recovery, but who are getting ready to get ready to
Mhm.
change their lives in that way. And it doesn't matter whether or not you are dealing with drugs or alcohol or any of those big main sort of addictions that come to mind when people think of addiction, because addiction is very can be very subtle and very sneaky and insidious. We can be addicted to our cell phones, we can be addicted to gambling, we can be addicted to sex, social media, work, food, you name it. And I think underneath all those things are a lot of the things that I talk about in the book. I talk about a lot about isolation and fear and shame and many other things. And I thought it was important to just begin the conversation with
Mhm.
people about it, because this book is beautiful and there's so much more that can be said about addiction, and that this may be just the starting point for many. And I'm glad I was able to create this, and begin this conversation with people and to provide them with the tools that have helped me in recovery.
Yeah, yeah, it's not just one tool. It's there's so many different things that
Hmm.
even if people reading it only get one thing out of it or only use two or three tools, that's still a great place to start. And I think your book is more than just a start. I wouldn't put it down to that because it really is very in depth, and a lot of the things that you teach, they're not kind of forced or promised big thing like do this for a week and your life will change forever. They're things that you're going to have for your whole life and
Yeah.
that you can use every day. You don't need a bunch of equipment for the exercises. You don't need, some kind of intensive course and big questionnaires to understand the theories that you present. And they're back theories. It's not just you making stuff up. It helped you in your life, and it was basically given to you by other people that helped them in their lives. So there's so much wisdom in it. What you were saying about the shame, what I found interesting was when I was reading the different chapters, there's fear, shame, but the shame one in particular, I was reading it, and through reading your experience, I was having my own memories pop up.
Mm.
And then my own memories pop up, and I can feel them in my body. And then what happens is you get to the end of the chapter and you have this thing to, hey, here's how you get rid of that in your body. And it's like the shaking, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. I feel wonderful. So it worked so well because I didn't feel like, I felt like I was reading a story, and then I felt like I was learning something, and then I felt like I was being released and healed, but it never felt like work. And that is enormous. A lot of stuff people feel lost. They don't know where to start. You solve that. A lot of stuff, oh, so much work. I already work so much, two jobs, and I come home and I have to do all the laundry and all this. I don't want to do any more work. It doesn't feel like work. And the results are immediate and long term. So a million stars. I don't do, book interviews a lot, but when I read that, I'm like, oh, Steve, will you be in an interview with me?
Oh,
Like,
that's
fun,
great.
because I knew I couldn't just say it all, but let me just show a little bit. I don't know if people will be able to see it, but there's actual illustrations and then very clear instructions. None of the exercises are super difficult, like when you see, welcome to yoga and do a handstand and sing, you can't do it, but it's very easy stuff. And
Accessible is really what I wanted the work to be. I wanted
Mhm.
it to be very accessible. I love what you're saying, Doe, about the book. At its core, the book is filled with self-care practices. And the truth of the matter is, most of us, we all need self-care. We all need to take care of ourselves. That's our most important job in life, is taking care of ourselves.
Mhm.
But so few of us do it consistently or do it really well. So what I wanted to do is just provide this array of tools that people can use and use in a way that's comfortable for them to help enhance their lives. And as I say at some point in the book, I always say this: take what you need and leave the rest. So whatever is useful to you, by all means, grab it, take it, use it, make it your own. And then whatever you're not ready for now or doesn't resonate with you, then you can set it aside and maybe come back to it later on, because you might change your mind.
Mhm.
But it's all about self-care, and it's just so important. And the movement portion that you talk about, I wanted there to be a movement component at the end of each chapter, because there's so much that we talk about in the chapter. There's so many tools that I provide for people in the recovery toolbox. There's so many questions that I ask people to consider and perhaps write their thoughts down, because we gain so much by journaling and writing down our thoughts. And I wanted an opportunity for people to integrate all of that into their body, because I think I'll speak for myself, having been being someone who has experienced a lot of trauma in my life. I know that trauma settles in the body. It's just like what Bessel van der Kolk said in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's in the tissues. And so there has to be a process of working with the body, which oftentimes when we're recovering from trauma, there's often a disconnection or dissociation from the body. So I just want to get people back into their bodies, to feel their bodies, to move their bodies, to move the energy in their bodies, and then pay attention to what they feel in the moment, because it brings them right into the present moment, not in
Mhm.
the past, not in the future, but right in the present moment.
And now the exercises, they're not just random things. They're qigong exercises. And
Mhm.
for those who don't know what qigong is, Stephen, what is it?
Qigong is an ancient Chinese healthcare system that combines flowing movement, standing postures, deep breathing, and focused intention to activate, cultivate, and circulate life force energy. And energy is something that we all need. It's something that we all want. Most of us want more than what we already have. And so when you break the word down, qigong, qi means energy or breath, and gong means work or skill. So qigong is a practice of becoming more skillful at managing our own energy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that when you were saying about trauma and pain and addictive behaviors or even negative behavior that becomes a habit, which is essentially an addiction,
Yeah,
energy gets stuck in different places. Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. And when from a Chinese medicine perspective, energy is meant to flow freely through the body. And things like stress, things like worry, things like bad habits, negative habits in terms of eating, or um, overusing alcohol, or using drugs, things like that, uh, take away energy from us or create areas in the body where energy gets stuck or stagnant. It's a, and when we have stuck energy or stagnant energy in the body, we experience pain, tension, disease. That's on a physical level, but on an energetic level, it also affects our emotions, right? We have turbulent emotions, that energy gets stuck, and so qigong helps us to move that energy. And then also when we think about our consciousness, our thoughts, when we have excess energy in the head, we tend to have headaches. We tend to have racing thoughts. We tend to have that what we call monkey mind, right, where you can't focus your mind. So qigong is a practice that helps to connect the body, the emotions, the mind, all of the energy, and circulate it flowing so it flows freely through the body, which ultimately leads us to a healthier way of living and feeling in our bodies.
Stephen, you're amazing. So, I mean, okay, even just your voice now, I'm a little bit of a spaz, you know this, but your voice is so calming, the way that you move. And that's not, again, it's not by accident. It's not your interview persona. That's you and who you've become. Have you noticed a big difference? Was it a gradual thing? How long did it take for you to become who you are now, this peaceful, wise, energetically centered person from where you were at, say, the lowest point of your addiction?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a good question. And
$40
I don't
question.
really I don't really know if I have a I don't really know if I have a satisfactory answer for that question. All I can say is that it's been a process for me.
Mhm.
It's been a process for me, and it's one that's unfolded over time. One of the things about me is that I've always been a relatively quiet person. I think people used to equate my quiet um, nature as being, I don't know, as being some sort of wise old soul, and that might even be true. But I feel as though what's happened in my life and through these experiences, especially going through those dark days around addiction and coming out on the other side into the light with my recovery, has filled me with so much strength and so much experience and hope and um, and also curiosity. Um, I hope I never lose my sense of curiosity because I want to continue to learn and grow and until the day that I die.
Mhm.
So, I don't know how to answer your question other than to
That's all
say
right.
that,
I was just thinking too, like, if someone is in that lost place and they get turned on to your book and they start reading and they start doing the exercises, how long could they maybe expect before they feel something? Is there going to be something instant? Is there going to be something after a couple of weeks of practice? How often should they do it? Kind of
beautiful.
thing with that.
That's a beautiful question. So I think qigong is such an amazing practice that you will feel shifts and you will feel some sort of change almost immediately once you begin practicing. What those changes or what those feelings or what's going to come up for you, the individual, is going to depend, it's going to vary. It's not going to be the same for each person. But it's such powerful medicine. Even if you don't know the ins and outs of Chinese medicine and qigong, the medicine will still do its work. Let me put it to you this way. When qigong entered my life, I was about 10 years sober and I had begun Chinese medicine school. Something that I worked really, really hard to achieve and to get into, because one of the reasons why it was so difficult for me to get into a school was because I had I had so much wreckage from my past to clean up. And some of that was related to my addiction, that by the time I'd made this change in my life, I had to go back to school and do a bunch of classes and keep, persevering. And I finally made it to a Chinese medicine program in California. I left my life in New York and moved to California, and I was so excited about the whole thing. And I told everyone that this is what I wanted to do. I knew without a doubt that this is what I wanted to do. Lo and behold, I get there. I start moving through the first 2 weeks of the program, and I start to have my doubts. I started to have my doubts as to whether or not this was the right thing for me. And that was such a scary, scary thing. And the stress of being in a graduate program was enormous. And I started to have anxiety. I started to have panic attacks. I started to lose sleep at night. I could barely sleep. I practically lost my appetite. I was crying in my car most days before I walked into class. Um, I didn't really know what to do. I thought I was going to relapse. I really did.
Wow.
And and eventually, in the curriculum, the qigong classes began, and something amazing happened. And I think it was in part because it's a movement practice, and I've been doing movement my whole life. I was doing energy work on myself, dancing around my living room as a child without even knowing what I was really doing. I just knew it made me feel good. But I was able to tap into this practice that was so beautifully shared with me by my teacher at the time. His name was Thomas. and I immediately started to feel better. The practice of Qigong, as well as some other changes that other people had suggested, helped me to release the worry, release the fear, release the shame that I was feeling for because I felt shameful for feeling what I was feeling. Um, so many things were going on, and I suddenly was able to ground myself enough to accept the situation as it was and realize that I could change my mind. Yes, I decided to go to Chinese medicine school, but it doesn't mean I had to stay. I could change my mind. I could do anything. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It doesn't matter. It was
Mhm.
incredibly freeing. I wouldn't have had those insights had it not been for the Qigong
Yes.
and the deep
And
breathing and that practice. So within a few sessions and continuing to practice at home, over the weeks, over the months that I was there, because I only did a semester, it completely transformed me. It
see,
completely
and that's even amazing because if you were already feeling great and you took the classes, you go from great to great. But because you had felt all those things and your path went the way that it went, you saw firsthand the enormous benefit of qigong, which is,
Qigong.
that might have been divinely orchestrated too, if you ask me.
Yes. One of the things that I love to say about Qigong is that it gives me space. It gives me space in my body, it gives me space in my heart, and it gives me space in my mind. It helps me to take my life and zoom out so that I can really see what's going on.
Mhm.
Because when we're in it, it's hard to see beyond it.
Yeah, impossible.
Yeah.
Stuck in their own story, and stepping back, you get to see it for how small, and the even the path through sometimes you can only
Mhm.
see from further back. Now, if people wanted to see just a little bit of what qigong is, your YouTube channel, I know that you have videos on there. Would you think that
Yeah.
where should they start on that?
Well, I have my YouTube channel where I have hundreds of videos that take people through the ancient Chinese practice of Qigong, as
Mhm.
well as I teach Pilates as well. You'll see that on there and other videos. I also have online courses that you can find on my website, stephenwashingtonexperience.com. And then I also have a membership community, the SWE Studio, where I teach Pilates and Qigong, a fusion class, and I also provide meditations and um, dance classes and laughter medicine, all practices that help people to live their best life. I think of this book as a wonderful tool that is useful for people in recovery and also people who love people who are in recovery. I think it's a great book for them too. And my SWE studio is kind of like continuing education beyond the book to
Mhm.
help you once you've begun this self-care practice for yourself through the pages of the book. And there's a video that I've made that's on my website that has all the exercises from the book on a video because we all have different ways of
Mhm.
learning, right?
Right.
But SWE studio is like the aftercare, the continuing education, the broadening of your self-care practice and the development of it.
Well, and even that is just amazing that you do that, because if people are curious, they can peek around the YouTube. If people want to learn more, they have the book, or they can delve more into the YouTube or your membership site. And if
Mhm.
people are really ready to commit, they can make the most of all of it, especially the membership site that has the daily exercises and all the library of meditations and different things. So that is just fantastic. And what an enormous amount of work that you have done and continue to do. I mean, gosh, could you imagine? Could you ever imagine that little boy dancing in his room, that this was going
Mhm.
to be your life? And you've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I couldn't have imagined it. You know, it's interesting because I have this theater background. I wanted to be a star. I wanted to be on a Broadway star or a television star. I wanted this so badly, and I'm so grateful at 51 that that never happened for me.
Mhm.
Because if had it happened for me, it would have destroyed me.
I can feel.
The pressures of it all, the fame and the money and yeah, it would have I would not have been able to hold it.
Yeah, I actually without going into my own thing, but I totally feel the same, is that I think looking back, what I wanted was validation and adoration, and I wanted all these things to come from the outside. But the
Mm,
path my life, and maybe the path your life took too, is that you ended up getting the validation and the belonging and the sense of being loved from inside instead. And
yeah.
then, if you do get a star or whatever, whatever kind of awards, that's going to be great, but you didn't need it. And if that was the only thing you had, it wouldn't be enough. So,
No, no, no. And that thing that you want so desperately, the thing is, if you did get it, it most likely would be less than you thought it would be.
hmm
You won't feel the way you thought you would feel. And that's something to be reckoned with too. And that's an interesting life experience to have and to go through for sure. Yeah.
well, I love your story. I love your life. I love you. You're just absolutely wonderful. And is
Oh.
there anything, I'm going to have the links to your site and your YouTube and to the book, which I, of course, definitely highly recommend. But is there anything else that you would like to share with people? Anything I left out?
No, what I will say is this. I There are three things that I hope people get from recovering you. I hope that they get a sense that they're not alone with whatever they're struggling with, that they're not alone. I hope that they also I hope that they also feel that they are that there's a reason why they are where they are. That there's a higher reason why they are where they are. And that I hope that they walk away with a bunch of tools that will help them to live a more conscious and joyous life. That's what I hope that people get out of recovering you.
I hope so too. And I know they will.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you.
It's been so wonderful to be with you, and always great to see you, talk to you. And thank you so much for writing this and for sharing it with everyone. It was a lot of work. Your heart is in it. You're so open and honest about everything that, if a person hadn't a friend in the world, felt like they weren't understood at all, and they read this book, they'll know they have one.
Mm.
And one is more than enough when it's such a good friend like you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you, Doe.
And
Thank
thank you for
you.
being here and watching. I really appreciate you. And please leave your comments and definitely check out Stephen's website, membership site, YouTube, all the rest of it. And 100% definitely get his book. It'd be a great gift too.